starting with therapy, I will say I knew much, like a lot longer that I guess a lot longer than when I started, or much before when I started. I don't know how to put that. Like I
Wait, let's talk about when you started first.
well, I know that's what I was gonna say. So I've been in therapy for almost 2 years. I would actually a year and a half. But before I had started therapy, I had always known I needed therapy, but it took so long for me to start therapy. And I don't really know why I took so long, just taking the plunge and seeing a therapist.
Yeah.
Actually, I probably do know, and I think it was like the stigma around therapy.
Because I think part of it too is, at least from our generation, when people talk about therapy, like, oh, like you're crazy, or you're mentally unstable.
Even cultural too. I feel like there's a lot of cultural things that had a big part in why I didn't go to therapy, because it's almost like I feel like
there's a lot of shame behind it.
Even my family, I don't think they prescribe to the idea of therapy and getting that type of help. Although there were many times, like throughout just my childhood and teenage years, and just a lot of experiences, even as a family, where it was very clear more than one of us within the family needed, an additional help. And I think that's how we need to start seeing it. It's like going to the doctor because you have a sinus infection, right? You're going to get treated. You're trying to find a solution. And obviously now there's so many different ways that you can treat your mental health. And I think it's just now becoming, and I think it's hard, right? Because you have a whole generation, like our generation, that found therapy so late in life. Yeah. And then you have a newer generation that I feel like sometimes overuses certain parts of the components of why you go to therapy. Like,
I heard some people, like even kids, go to therapy now too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I think we talk about it so much. It's the help and
it's normalized now, I feel like.
Yeah, it is normalized. But I think too, and my therapist and I talked about this on Monday, is the idea of trauma and anxiety and depression, and what that actually looks like, and how to differentiate when that truly is the root, or if you're just kind of playing on the word or overusing the word. Yeah. Because I think sometimes words like trigger or trauma or anxiety or depression or whatever else gets desensitized because so many people use it. It's like, it's just a catchphrase now, like, oh, I have anxiety, or, oh, I'm ADHD. But it's like, okay, everyone says they're ADHD, but are you diagnosed ADHD? And not to say that you don't have it, or you know what I mean? But I feel like it's different, at least for me, from thinking I had all these things to actually knowing I had all these things, and then treating it, and then fully understanding, like this is how you work with it. But I always knew, and unfortunately a couple years ago, things got really, really intense in my life, and I was going through a lot of things. There's financial components, there was work components, there was health, there was family stuff. We had to leave our apartment and go to my parents' house. So it's like all these things just kind of happening at once. And work was also at the time very stressful. I got into a role, and it was probably one of the first times where I truly didn't feel like I was being successful in that position. And I think that really, in a way, like hurt my ego. You know what I mean? And I struggled so hard because I take a lot of pride in my work and my work ethic and how I manage or how I lead. And it was just not working for me. Like there were so many things about it that I think that were uncontrollable factors, but it just added that extra thing. And I literally, like with that extra thing, it was like my breaking point, like to the point where Like I'm like screaming and crying to my husband and being like, I can't do this anymore. You know, like, what do I, you know, and like literally like crying for help. But I stuck it out, and I noticed while at work, because I left the position I was in, went into a new position that I really wanted, but I was still having these issues. Mm-hmm. And so these issues started turning into like, I don't know. It was, to me, I thought something was wrong with my brain. Like I would have points where I would freeze and like, I don't know how to explain it. Like I would,
you black out?
I would black out. I would lose time, or I would do something and then completely forget what I just did. And then it was getting to the point where I was having conversations or even sometimes like disagreements with my husband. Mm-hmm. And then we would talk about it again, and then I would have no recollection of what I spoke about.
Interesting.
And then it's just like I'd try to do things at work, or I try to do things at home, and then I freeze, and then I'm like, what was I doing? Why was I doing this? Why am I here? Like, you know, and it was constant, like, what the heck is going on? Yeah. And I tried everything to avoid the idea of it being mental health.
Were you like taking medications during that time too?
No, I wasn't taking medications. I went to the doctor and I was like, something's up. So I did lab work. I did all these things and nothing.
Was it scary to like experience that? Or was it just like, oh, this is kind of
when I started losing my memory, that's what scared me the most. Like the experience of going to the doctor wasn't scary, but what led to that is what scared me, because I used to have a really good memory, and like my recollection of things and my retention of information was great. And it was like night and day change. Like I can even till this day, I can't read a book, and I loved reading. I was one of those like avid, just like page after page, like read a whole book in 2 days or a day. And I can't retain, and I don't know what it is. I think I'm still working through some things. But I literally can't, the focus isn't there. Like my brain is so fired up on other things, you know, I just can't hone in on certain things, which is unfortunate because I would love to read again. And every time I try, I get a little disappointed. But I went to the doctor and I did all the blood tests. I did everything. I even did mold testing. I thought, I was like, there's mold in the house. Like this is messing with my, you know, like why am I sleeping like all day? Why can't I get out of bed? You know, why am I so fatigued? Or why can't I remember anything? Or why can't I focus on anything? Or why am I so unorganized? Or why can't I be a mom? Or why am I a horrible, like just all these different things. And I'm like, my brain's messed up. Like there's something on with my brain. I'm like, oh, I have a brain problem. Like, do a CAT scan. Well, I didn't go that far, but I wanted to. I was like, there's a tumor. But I literally was avoiding it for so long. And I finally had to come clean to my manager because I knew my performance at work was slipping. And it just got to a point where he needed to know. Yeah. And so we kind of had a conversation, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. And then he brought up this idea of like stress. He's like, you know, stress can do a lot of things to you, and it, you know, it can be very detrimental to your health and yada, yada, yada. But I was pretty adamant. I was like, no, there's something wrong. Like hormone, I got to see an endocrinologist, like all this other stuff. Anyways, fast forward, all of that came back fine. And I started, before I started seeing an actual therapist, where I went to the doctor, they offered like a life coach.
Okay.
And so I felt like, I was like,
keep you organized and
well, just kind of helps support you in certain things that you're struggling in life. And so I opted to do that because I just felt like, oh, that's a life coach. Like it's not therapy.
It sounds better, right? Like it sounds more progressive,
right?
Than like you trying to heal your trauma. Yeah.
And so I went to my life coach. I did my sessions there, and my life coach also suggests, I think she suggested, you know, it wouldn't be a bad idea if you saw a therapist or if you wanted to continue I think just for some of the more deeper things that I needed to kind of work through. And so I finally took the plunge and called, I think it was Great Basin Behavioral Health, and had my first session. And I think I got really lucky because I liked the therapist I was talking to, and it was all remote. But the first day it was like word vomit.
Wait, remote? So you just...
Yeah, it's Zoom.
Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought it was like in person where you sit in the couch. And...
No. And honestly, I mean, maybe people have their preference, but I think it wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah. You're still talking.
Yeah, and you see them, you know what I mean? And you still get all the emotion or the information the same, at least for me. But I had my first session, and I think my expectation was like, oh, we're going to dive deep into my past and try to figure all this stuff out. And so the first session was literally that, like me just word vomiting all the things, all the crazy things.
Well, from what you learned from therapy, like, oh, just talking about your trauma.
Yeah. And like, or at least what you think therapy is going to be about. And then it very quickly turned into, okay, well, let's focus on what brought you here now. Like, why are you here now? You know, because I've always had that experience prior, and I never went because of that, but I went now because I felt like everything was so out of hand. Mm-hmm. And so essentially I had to work through what my challenges, what my daily challenges were. And after a few sessions, she's like, I'm gonna be honest. She's like, I feel like you have ADHD. And prior to that, she already determined, just based off some of our conversations and feedback and my moods, that I was, that I did, you know, have some like depression and anxiety. Mm-hmm. And basically what she was thinking, like my moments where I just blank out, or, you know, it's like, you ever get in your car and you drive and then you're somewhere and you're like, how the hell did I get there? Have you ever had that experience?
Yes.
So in a sense, it's like I'm disassociating. Like my brain needs a break. So when I have my moments of freeze, or when I'm having these gaps in time, it's like my brain is like, hey, we're overloading, so we're gonna shut down now. And it doesn't warn me. And it started to get to the point where like I'd pick up my son and then I'd forget to buckle him up, you know, and then I'd drive off, and then he'd be like, hey mom, you didn't buckle me. And I'm like, oh my God, you know. And it's like when it starts impacting the people around you, especially like your children, I'm like, oh, this is not, like, I need to go get this fixed.